Today, we have a very accomplished academic and intellectual whose specialty is, interestingly enough, medieval studies. The reason why Carmen Benito Vessels is here is for a more contemporary book that she has written regarding Spain and the Atlantic coast of the United States, voyage, settlements, and explorations. Carmen is a professor at the University of Maryland, full professor, and a curious and very knowledgeable Spaniard who is an immigrant here and who has so much to talk about with us. And without further ado, Carmen, welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Patrice, for this wonderful presentation.
So before we begin to discuss the book, Carmen, we're most interested in learning about you and your path in life.
I'm a medievalist, and I was born in Salamanca, the most medieval city in Spain. Prior to going to California, I did my MA and BA at the University of Salamanca. I graduated in Romance philology, and then I went to Portugal with another scholarship for 2 years to the University of Lisbon, where I continued my postgrad studies, also related Middle Ages and the discoveries, the period of the discoveries of the Portuguese navigators, which happened around the 1500s, which is the period related in which the events of my book also happened. So it was Salamanca, University of Salamanca, Romance philology, University of Lisbon, several areas of studies, and then the University of California, where I specialize in medieval literature.
Could you explain to us the essence of the book and why you wrote it and what it means, the messaging of the characters?
Thank you. Well, the title of the book is España y la costa atlántica de los Estados Unidos, cuatro personajes del siglo XVI en busca de autor. In essence, this book deals with the navigations and explorations and settlements of two of my characters, Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón and Pedro Menéndez de Avilés, which happened in the east coast of the United States. And not only in the east coast, but in two places that are extremely close to the two major settlements of the English, which were, everybody knows about Jamestown. Jamestown was in 1607 and Anahakan was 1570. And the previous English settlement that everybody knows about is Roanoke, the lost colony. The lost colony was established in 1585. And close to Roanoke is another colony, Spanish colony, San Miguel de Gualdape, which was established in 1526, so 30 years prior, and very, very close to each other. Immediately, everybody can think, well, it's a very popular road. Yeah, it's very popular, but the coincidence is enormous. So I basically deal with the establishment of these Spanish colonies, which when they are mentioned in some bibliography, they are mentioned as settlements. But they were not settlements, they were real colonies. They had a very brief history, but Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón brought, you would never imagine, 600 people with him to establish San Miguel de Gualdape. He brought 6 caravels. Nobody knows about that.
Nobody. Mm-hmm.
And as I say, if this settlement is mentioned or little, we don't have any information about San Miguel de Gualdape. And this is very sad because the explanation can be, well, we may have different explanations, but we don't have artifacts that belong to that colony.
What about the Spanish crown? How many times through maps, which, as I understand, were works of art and were secrets of state, was the royal house privy to information about these settlements?
Yeah, I will show you a few maps, only 3 or 4, which are very extremely relevant, eye-openers, and excuse me, authentic works of art. These maps were kept under 7 keys. Yeah, it was an enormous problem with secrecy, because the secret, it was not kept all the time, and many navigators would make false copies or will sell copies, and that's how many of the maps that were originally kept in Seville in the Casa de Contratación then traveled magically to other places in Europe. So that's a part of this book as well. The 2 Spaniards who established San Miguel de Gualdape and Ajacan, the maps, the chronicles in which we find the narratives, and more important for many of us is the fact that the 2 first bilingual Native Americans happened to work with Pedro Menéndez de Avilés and Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón. They were Francisco Chicorano, who worked for, they were enslaved, of course, and I'm sorry to say that, but it was a tragic situation. We cannot forget that or paint it in magical or beautiful colors. It was slavery, plain and simple slavery. But this Francisco Chicorano worked or was a captive of Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón, and the other Native American Indian he was kind of aristocratic in his name, Don Luis de Velasco, also known as El Indio Don Luis. And he worked he was forced to work for Pedro Menéndez de Avilés, and helped Avilés to go to Ajacan. It will be very naive to think that any person will bring somebody else to conquer your own native city. It will be absolutely unimaginable. So what happened in both cases is that these both Native American Indians betrayed the Spaniards in a different manner. And what is extraordinary is that they both obviously spoke Spanish. They were both brought to Spain. And even more fascinating is that they were invited basically to the dining room table of one of the most renowned humanists of the time, Pedro Mártir de Anglería. And it's through Pedro Mártir de Anglería that we know how these territories were described by Chicorano. So it's a series of events that they are not fiction, but they certainly make us think, is this real? And we do have the documents, we do have the maps. And we even have the documents in which Charles I gave Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón the rights to the conquer of over 2,000 square miles. We have the document. So 2,000 square miles were given by Charles I to Lucas Vázquez de Ayllón. Now, let's put this in perspective. And what's Delaware? Delaware is only 1,900 square miles.
It's the smallest state, right?
So I think that this is basically the nucleus where my research started growing and growing. And the question of cartography, it was absolutely amazing. I wish I were a cartographer, because the intrigues, the fights for power among the cartographers, the absolute secrecy and the betrayal among them was extraordinary.
Do you think that had a lot to do with the British conquering or settling?
It's my inclination. They also it's my inclination to think that, because simply they have pirates sitting down in the Caribbean waiting for the Spanish ships to go through. And we have the story, one of these pirates who worked for England. He also was educated in Spain. If I give you the name, Giovanni da Verrazzano. Giovanni da Verrazzano went by other names. And now I cannot believe I forgot his Spanish name.
He had a lot of names.
Yeah, Juan Florin. Juan
Florin.
If I tell you, do you know Juan Florin? No. Do you know Giovanni da Verrazzano? You know the bridge, the Verrazzano Bridge? Well, that Verrazzano worked in Spain. And he was closely related to the Casa de Contratación. He was also instructed by he was with Cristobal Colon at one point. So the same with John Cabot. He also was contracted by King Ferdinand, and worked in Seville and Barcelona. So they have obviously contacts with other cartographers. So it will be fascinating to follow this thread and see where the lives of these cartographers and the sponsors.
Well, I think that's your next novel. In your free time, which you have none. This is probably a basic question, but as a professor for so many years in a prestigious university in the United States, the Spanish-speaking world contributed so much to the development of the United States. Why don't Americans know more about this topic?
Well, first of all, I will have to say it's not their fault. I have two children who have received a fabulous education. At the University of Maryland, I have incredible, good students, very wise colleagues, very accomplished colleagues who know very little about this part of Spanish history, which I call the missing link, which is, it starts in Florida, but it doesn't stop in Florida. And I have to admit, every conquer is a tragic episode in anybody's lives, or it is no way to narrate it with beautiful colors and disguise the negative aspects. But let's face it, this was the 1500s. And it's not that we can pardon that, but some of the same episodes we see them today. Leaving that aside, I have to say that every country, starting in the Middle Ages, every country tried to present a history of glories. In Spain, we have the Spanish epic, and everything is glorious, marvelous. The Cid is a saint, basically. Well, it depends who narrates the story, right? Because if you choose the Chronicle of Moro Racis, you see a different narrative. And in other words, la historia la escriben los vencedores. And it was very, Spain obviously had all Latin America, and the United States didn't have any interest in having the Spanish name in farther north of Florida, perhaps Texas, San Antonio, a little bit in California, but forget putting in the forefront, in the first page, what happened in other parts of this country. Mm-hmm. And obviously the Spanish presence, not only from Spain, but from from all the Latin American countries, have a lot to contribute to the present life of the United States. And I think that it's up to us to retell the story without animosity, with facts, with pride. I think that we have to be very proud of our achievements, and certainly with engagement, trying to engage both audiences is very important to establish a bridge. If you antagonize a reader, if you antagonize a student, forget it. They're going to close the book. They don't have any other. They don't follow you.
Right.
So it was a tragic moment when in the 19th century, we have the War of Cuba, we had the War of Spain against the United States, and at that point we have a tragic character whose name is Robert Greenhow, who is a person who was a translator, and he worked for the State Department. And he basically distorted the narrative of the founding of Virginia. There is a book, an entire book dedicated to El Indio Don Luis and this particular aspect, written by Anna Brickhouse. And there we see where the problem really started, how the history was completely distorted.
That is very interesting. If you could send us that link, perhaps we could find the author of that book or scholars in that area.
Absolutely. I will send that to you. It was fundamental for my own work, and actually I quote her extensively, and I say that also in the beginning of my book. Mm-hmm. There are so many quotes because I didn't find the facts, I found the results.
Right.
And all we needed was somebody to read in different languages, to have an open mind, to not have a flag carrying in every page of the book, and just being interested in the narration of history. And Anna Brickhouse does that as well.
Well, that's wonderful. I don't want to keep you anymore. You have a lot of papers to grade. And
absolutely. Before we go, can I just show two maps?
Certainly, yes, please do.
Okay, yeah, I have spoken a lot about this, and I'm going to share my screen with you, and hopefully this map is one of my favorites. It was done by Juan Vespucio, or Giovanni Vespucci, who was the nephew of Amerigo Vespucci. If anybody has a doubt that the Spanish explorers were in North America, here you have the Águila Imperial, way in the northern of Florida, and obviously we have the coast delineated here, showing that the Spaniards knew these territories already in 1526. And let's remember again, Jamestown, 1606. And this other map is even more magnificent, is the Diego Rivera Planisferio, 1527, in which we see all the coast from the Labrador Peninsula all the way to Patagonia, with names. All these little lines that you see here, those are names of rivers. All the names were in Spanish, of course. So the Hudson River, guess how it was? Guess what the Hudson River name was? The San Antonio River. So San Antonio, you are in Rio, close to Rio San Antonio, and many others. I'm not going to go through all of them because it will be boring. And here you have the Tierra de Ayllón, to which I was referring before, and which was given to Ayllón by Charles I. And I see that something is clicking. It probably means that we have to go.
Well, Carmen, it's been amazingly informative and interesting. And on behalf of the Institute, we thank you and we include you in our list of friends. And so
thank you.
This dialogue will continue.
Thank you so very much, Patrice. It was a wonderful opportunity, and certainly I will follow you in your activities, and I appreciate the invitation very, very, very much.
Thank you very much. Okay.